Hey everyone, I'm JR, and this is one of Mike's mini history lessons. In a small country where blacksmiths work tirelessly as they have for hundreds of years to create the swords of the Crusades that, with the strength of God, will vanquish the infidels, word of the Ottomans marching on the Holy Land had finally reached Georgia. No, not one of the original 13 U.S. colonies, but the small country just north of Turkey and south of Russia, with a written language that looks as though it inspired Tolkien and a flag that bears the cross of the Knights Templar. And the Knights Templar is what this lesson is about. Before we can understand how a group of knights straight out of the 13th century ended up on the battlefields of World War I, we must first understand the country from which they hailed. The country known as Georgia derives its name, Gurgen, the land of the wolves, from the Persian word for the frightening and heroic people of that territory. Georgia, a country at the intersection of Europe and Asia, is home to Black Sea beaches and Caucasus mountain villages that have been cut off entirely from the modern world. Famous for Vardzia, a sprawling cave monastery dating back to the 12th century, and the ancient wine-growing region, Kakheti, the capital, Tbilisi, is known for the diverse architecture and the maze-like cobblestone streets of its old town. Georgia is also a proud Christian nation. The Crusades of 1202 might have been long behind them, but the directive of the Crusades had no expiration date, and in 1915, when the news finally filtered its way up to the mountains that the Russian Empire declared war on Turkey, as part of its alliance with the Triple Entente in Western Europe in 1914, a troop of Crusader knights in full medieval Templar armor marched right up to the governor's house in the Georgian capital, then called Tiflis, and asked, "Where's the war? We hear there's a war." The knights were known locally as Kevsurs, a group of fighters allegedly descended from the medieval Crusaders, whose armor bore the motto of the Crusaders, as well as the Crusader cross. The truth behind the Kevsurs' Crusader origin is disputed, but what isn't disputed is that they showed up to fight in World War I in the spring of 1915, wearing Crusader armor. The knights made their way to stop the Ottoman hordes amassing at the southern border. Several days later, they arrived with their pennants streaming from atop their lances, fully covered in chainmail. After a quick prayer and a speech from their Lord Commander, the knights lowered their lances and charged headstrong into an army of Turks armed with machine guns and rifles, backed by mortars and cannons. Call it a slaughter, or call it something else, but needless to say, the Crusader Knights of the Kevsurs brought knives to a gunfight and didn't last long. If that wasn't enough, this isn't the only time this happened. This story repeated itself, with the only difference being sometimes the machine guns belonged to the Germans. The Russian army in general was oftentimes very poorly equipped during World War I. Some members of the Russian army were equipped with only the muskets from the times of Napoleon and a horse. This is most likely what led to the Russians surrendering before the Allied victory, which in turn led to the communist revolts and the end of the Russian Empire. But that's a lesson for another day. Or at least, that's the lesson you would get if Mike was your history teacher. Hey guys, thanks for listening. If you have any suggestions or topics for us to cover, email us at 4guysmedianetwork@gmail.com. If you're on the go, you can subscribe to our shows on iTunes. Be sure to check out our Patreon page, 4Guys Media Network, for access to exclusive content like minisodes and more. We have a lot of goals to hit, so we can keep improving and continue providing more content ad-free. So all of your donations are greatly appreciated. Make sure you subscribe to the 4Guys Media Network YouTube channel for all of our other projects by clicking the link on the right. And lastly, if you want to watch another episode, just click the link on the left. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.